Imagine walking into a dark desert cave and finding a treasure map unlike anything ever discovered. Not written on paper, not painted on parchment, but hammered into solid sheets of copper. A document so unusual that more than 70 years later, archaeologists are still asking the same question. Did someone really hide one of history's greatest treasures and never come back for it? That is exactly what happened on March 14, 1952, when archaeologists discovered a strange metallic scroll hidden deep inside Cave 3, near the ancient settlement of Qumran, overlooking the Dead Sea. At first glance, it appeared to be just another ancient manuscript, but it was unlike every other scroll found in the region. While the famous Dead Sea Scrolls contained religious writings, prayers, prophecies, and biblical texts written on fragile parchment and papyrus, this document stood completely alone. It was not a prayer. It was not a prophecy. It was something far more unusual. A treasure inventory. Today, known as the Copper Scroll, or officially catalogued as 3Q15, the artifact had survived nearly 2,000 years in the harsh desert environment. But survival came at a cost. The copper had corroded into a fragile green shell. Any attempt to unroll it using normal methods would have destroyed the ancient writing trapped inside. For more than 3 years, scholars debated how to open it without losing the message forever. Then came a risky decision. On the recommendation of scholar John Marco Allegro, Gerald Lancaster Harding, the director of Antiquities of Jordan, approved an unusual plan. Instead of forcing the scroll open, engineers would carefully cut through it. The artifact was transported to Manchester, England, where Professor H. Wright Baker and his team created a specially designed cutting apparatus. Between 1955 and 1956, they used an ultra-thin circular saw to divide the brittle copper cylinder into 23 curved sections. It was a dangerous operation. One mistake could have destroyed the entire text. But when the first pieces were finally separated, scholars realized they were looking at something completely unexpected. This was not a religious manuscript. It was a detailed record. The writing was an early form of Mishnaic Hebrew, mixed with unusual technical terms found nowhere else in ancient literature. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to carve these words into valuable copper, creating a document designed to survive long after ordinary materials had disappeared. But the real shock came when the translation was finally completed. The numbers became even more astonishing as scholars continued reading. Across the entire scroll, the inventory described approximately 65 tons of silver and more than 26 tons of gold, along with sacred objects, priestly garments, and ritual materials. If those estimates were accurate, the treasure would represent an enormous fortune by modern standards, and that raises the greatest question of all. Was the treasure real? Or was the copper scroll something else entirely? The biggest challenge begins with the geography. The directions recorded on the copper scroll appear incredibly specific, but only to someone who already knew the ancient landscape. The scribe refers to locations such as the cave of the old Bet Hamare and the cistern in front of the eastern gate. To the people living in ancient Judea, these may have been ordinary landmarks, but after centuries of wars, earthquakes, floods, and changing landscapes, those names disappeared. Today, many of those places can no longer be identified with certainty. And that is only the beginning of the mystery. The Copper Scroll also contains another puzzle that has never been fully explained. At the end of several entries, the writer added strange groups of Greek letters, including combinations such as K-E-N, H-N, and T-P. Their meaning remains unknown. Are they names, abbreviations, directions, or perhaps secret codes known only to the people who buried the treasure? After decades of research, no one has been able to prove their true purpose. Yet the greatest mystery lies in the treasure itself. The very first entry revealed something extraordinary. It stated, "At Koreba, situated in the valley of Achor, below the steps leading to the east, dig 40 cubits, a coffer of money, the sum of which is the weight of 17 talents." That was only the first of 64 separate locations. Each entry described another hiding place, another cache, another buried secret. The numbers became even more astonishing as scholars continued translating the scroll. Yet despite more than 70 years of searching, not a single treasure described in the copper scroll has ever been recovered. No gold, no silver, no sacred artifacts, nothing. And that raises an unavoidable question. Was the treasure ever real? Or was the copper scroll something else entirely? Some historians believe the treasure truly existed, while others argue that the scroll was never intended to lead anyone to buried riches. Instead, they suggest it may have served as a symbolic record, or even a literary creation. Without the treasure itself, there is no way to know for certain. Every unanswered question only deepens the mystery. And that mystery has divided scholars for decades. Some believe they know exactly who buried the treasure. Others believe the answer lies somewhere completely different. Because the treasure described was so enormous, some scholars questioned whether the copper scroll was ever meant to be a real treasure map. In 1962, Father Josef Milik, one of the leading scholars involved in studying the Dead Sea Scrolls, argued that the treasure could have been a symbolic or literary creation rather than a real buried fortune. But another scholar strongly disagreed. John Marco Allegro believed the physical evidence pointed in the opposite direction. Copper was an expensive material in the ancient world. Creating such a large document from solid copper would have required significant resources. According to Allegro, no community would spend that much effort creating a permanent metal document simply to record a fictional story. He also pointed to the handwriting itself. The letters become increasingly crowded toward the ends of several columns, suggesting that the writer may have been working under pressure. To Allegro, the copper scroll looked less like a legend and more like an emergency inventory created during a time of crisis. To test his theory, Allegro organized one of the first serious expeditions in 1962. His team investigated several locations mentioned in the scroll, including the desert fortress of Hyrcania. They excavated underground chambers and searched the surrounding landscape. But when the expedition finally ended, they found nothing. So who buried this treasure? That question remains one of the greatest mysteries surrounding the copper scroll. Some historians believe the wealth belonged to the Essene community associated with Qumran. Researchers including Carl Georg Kuhn and Chaim Rabin connected the treasure directly to the Second Temple of Jerusalem. According to this theory, during the Great Jewish Revolt in 70 CE, Roman armies surrounded Jerusalem. The Second Temple contained enormous wealth: gold vessels, sacred objects, and generations of accumulated offerings. As the city faced destruction, priests may have hidden these treasures through underground tunnels before burying them across the Judean wilderness, hoping to recover them after the crisis had passed. A third theory suggests that the treasure was hidden much later, during the Bar Kokhba revolt, between 132 and 135 CE. Each theory explains part of the evidence, but none answers every question. Then comes perhaps the strangest detail of all. The final entry of the copper scroll suggests that another document exists, a second copper record, a master copy. According to column 12, entry 64, this hidden document contained the complete explanations, measurements, and detailed directions needed to understand every treasure location listed on the copper scroll. If that statement is true, then the copper scroll we know today may only be half of the story. The real key to the mystery may still be missing. Today, the broken pieces of the original copper scroll are preserved inside a climate-controlled display at the Jordan Museum in Amman. The artifact is real. The inscriptions are real. The locations are recorded. But the treasure itself remains hidden somewhere beneath the wind-swept limestone cliffs of the Judean wilderness. May lie one of the greatest undiscovered fortunes of the ancient world. And until someone finds it, the copper scroll will remain one of archaeology's greatest unsolved mysteries. If you enjoyed this investigation, consider subscribing to Harris Lore. Your support really helps a new channel grow and allows me to keep creating more historical mysteries and forgotten stories. Until next time.